Today we delve into Project Mercury, America's first human spaceflight program.
A fascinating period indeed.
We're in the midst of the Cold War, the space race is heating up, and the U.S. is under immense pressure to catch up with the Soviet Union.
The Soviets had, shall we say, a head start.
They did rather, Sputnik and Gagarin. But Project Mercury aimed to put an American in orbit and bring him back safely.
A bold objective.
It certainly was. We have a wealth of sources to explore: declassified documents, astronaut biographies.
Remarkable insights into this era of pioneering space exploration. It truly captures the challenges and triumphs of Project Mercury.
What particularly struck me is how the program, arising from the newly formed NASA, adopted this resourceful can-do approach.
Necessity, as they say, is the mother of invention. The Space Task Group, formed within NASA, had to think creatively.
So they weren't waiting for brand new technologies to emerge.
No, not at all. They cleverly adapted existing technologies, like modified Redstone and Atlas missiles, for instance.
That pragmatic approach seems to be a hallmark of Project Mercury.
Pragmatism driven by the urgency of the Cold War rivalry.
Absolutely. But beyond just outdoing the Soviets, what were the core aims of Project Mercury?
Demonstrating American capability in space was, of course, a key factor, but there was a crucial scientific element, too.
To understand how humans would actually cope in space.
Precisely. Could pilots function effectively in weightlessness? Could they withstand the intense G-forces of launch and re-entry? These were unknowns with significant implications.
And so began the search for those who would face these unknowns. The Mercury 7.
Whittled down from an initial 508 candidates, these 7 test pilots, the absolute elite,
An elite group indeed.
subjected to a barrage of grueling physical and mental tests, designed to push them to the very edge of human endurance.
I read about extreme temperatures, isolation chambers. It sounds absolutely grueling.
It was designed to select only the most resilient individuals, those capable of withstanding the rigors of space travel.
And even figures like Chuck Yeager, the first man to break the sound barrier, didn't make the cut.
His lack of a college degree was a disqualifying factor at that time. Even Neil Armstrong, who was the civilian test pilot then, was initially rejected.
A rather different trajectory history might have taken.
Indeed. Those selection criteria underscore the initial focus on military personnel.
Let's shift our focus now to the Mercury spacecraft itself. It was, shall we say, compact.
Compact is one way to put it. The cone-shaped capsule was strikingly small, designed purely to transport an astronaut to orbit and back safely.
I imagine it was a rather snug fit.
Snug indeed. The interior, with its 120 controls, custom-molded seat, and the astronaut positioned on his back facing the heat shield, presented a unique set of challenges.
Quite a contrast to the comparatively spacious vehicles we see today. What's intriguing is the astronauts' insistence on having manual controls and a window.
Features that some engineers considered unnecessary?
You would think they would be essential.
And indeed, these features proved vital in later missions. John Glenn's experience on Mercury Atlas 6, where a malfunctioning automatic control system forced him to take manual control, highlights this perfectly.
A testament to the astronauts' training and their ability to adapt to unforeseen circumstances.
Absolutely. They were far more than just passengers.
Now, on to the launch vehicles that powered these missions.
The Redstone rocket, a modified version of the German V2, was employed for suborbital flights. For orbital missions, they used the more powerful Atlas missile.
And let's not forget the aptly named Little Joe.
Ah, yes, Little Joe, a smaller rocket crucial for testing the launch escape system.
It seems every component was meticulously tested, underlining the inherent risks involved. Shall we dive into the missions themselves?
By all means, let's follow the timeline.
Excellent. So on 5 May 1961, we have Alan Shepard aboard Freedom 7, becoming the first American in space.
A suborbital flight lasting just 15 minutes, but a monumental achievement nonetheless.
Although it didn't achieve orbit like Yuri Gagarin's flight a few weeks prior.
True, but still a significant step for the American space program.
It wasn't without its hiccups, though.
Ah, yes. The infamous bathroom break incident.
A rather delicate subject.
Launch delays left Shepard in the capsule for longer than anticipated.
And the lack of a urine collection system at that stage led to, well,
an unplanned event.
An important, if somewhat uncomfortable, lesson learned. Next, we have Gus Grissom's flight aboard Liberty Bell 7 on 21 July 1961.
Another suborbital venture, and one that ended rather dramatically.
Indeed. Grissom's flight went smoothly until splashdown when the explosive hatch prematurely blew open.
flooding the capsule and forcing Grissom to make a rather hasty exit.
He maintained he hadn't touched the hatch release.
But suspicion lingered until Wally Schirra accidentally triggered the hatch on a later flight, receiving a bruise in the process. Only then was Grissom exonerated.
A rather unfortunate sequence of events, but one that ultimately led to crucial safety improvements. Then, on 20 February 1962, John Glenn, aboard Friendship 7, etched his name in history.
Becoming the first American to orbit the Earth, a pivotal moment in the space race.
He completed 3 orbits in just under 5 hours.
A remarkable feat, especially considering he faced some technical difficulties. His automatic control system malfunctioned, highlighting the importance of the astronaut's piloting skills. Then there was the concern about the heat shield. A faulty sensor suggested it might have come loose.
A rather nail-biting moment, I imagine.
Absolutely. Mission Control decided to keep the retro rocket pack attached during re-entry, hoping it would secure the heat shield.
A calculated risk.
Indeed. Thankfully, the shield held and Glenn returned safely. A testament to human ingenuity and a good measure of luck. Next, we have Scott Carpenter piloting Aurora 7 on 24 May 1962, a mission with a focus on scientific experimentation. Carpenter conducted experiments on liquids and weightlessness and attempted to observe a ground-based flare.
And he inadvertently solved the mystery of John Glenn's fireflies.
Quite right. He realized that ice particles, frozen condensation from the spacecraft's cooling system, were dislodged when he bumped the cabin wall, explaining Glenn's observations.
A serendipitous discovery. But this mission, too, had a rather dramatic conclusion.
Fuel management and attitude control problems led to Carpenter landing significantly off course,
Delaying recovery and resulting in some criticism of his performance.
despite the mission's overall success
These early missions highlight the unpredictable nature of space travel.
and the steep learning curve involved.
Moving on to Wally Schirra's flight aboard Sigma 7 on 3 October 1962. Here we see a shift in focus towards endurance and piloting proficiency.
After the issues on Carpenter's flight, the emphasis was on proving the reliability of both the spacecraft and the astronauts' ability to handle longer missions.
So it was about demonstrating that they had learned from those previous experiences.
Precisely. Schirra, spending over 9 hours in orbit and completing 6 orbits, successfully demonstrated both.
And his accidental triggering of the explosive hatch, while startling, served to exonerate Grissom.
An unintended but valuable outcome.
The final act of Project Mercury was Gordon Cooper's flight aboard Faith 7, launched on 15 May 1963.
A truly remarkable flight. Cooper spent a record-breaking 34 hours in space, completing 22 orbits.
More than double the duration of any previous American mission.
This feat proved the feasibility of extended spaceflight, paving the way for the longer missions of Gemini and Apollo.
A fitting culmination to Project Mercury.
Indeed, a testament to how far they had come in just a few short years.
Before we delve deeper into the specifics of those missions, let's acknowledge the vital role of ground control and the extensive tracking network.
Absolutely. The success of Project Mercury was as much about the team on the ground as the astronauts in space.
Those images of mission control are iconic, but they only reveal a small part of the story.
The manned spaceflight network, a technological marvel of its time, enabled continuous communication with the spacecraft, tracking stations on ships, planes, and land-based locations across the globe.
Maintaining communication throughout the mission must have been incredibly challenging, particularly in those early days of computing and satellite communication.
It was a logistical and technical feat, requiring extraordinary coordination and expertise.
Quite a remarkable undertaking, really, when you consider the technological constraints of the time. Imagine tracking this tiny capsule, hurtling around the Earth using 1960s computers. Must have been quite a feat.
It certainly pushed the boundaries of what was then achievable. We mustn't forget, these astronauts were pioneers venturing into the unknown, strapped into what amounted to a sophisticated tin can. Their courage was extraordinary.
And those tin cans, the Mercury spacecraft, they underwent a bit of an evolution in design, didn't they? A few hiccups along the way.
Yes, indeed. The initial design, Configuration C, I believe it was called, well, it failed a test flight in 1959. Turned out the airframe was simply too fragile. Couldn't withstand the stresses of flight.
So, back to the drawing board.
Precisely. They reinforced the structure, creating Configuration D, which became the blueprint for all the subsequent Mercury capsules. Shows their adaptability, doesn't it? Refining the design even as the program was underway.
And then there was the heat shield. Absolutely critical, of course, for the astronauts' survival during re-entry.
Vital. Initially, they considered a heat sink, to absorb the heat, but ultimately, they opted for an ablative shield.
For those of us less familiar with the technical jargon, could you perhaps elaborate on what an ablative shield is?
Certainly. It's designed to burn away in a controlled manner during re-entry, you see, dissipating the intense heat generated by atmospheric friction, directing it away from the spacecraft, essentially a sacrificial layer that protects the capsule and the astronaut inside. They tested various materials and shapes rigorously, wind tunnels, even ballistic missile flights, all to ensure it would be effective.
So that iconic image, the Mercury capsule glowing red hot during re-entry, that's the ablative shield doing its job.
Exactly. A visual testament to the extreme conditions these missions had to endure.
And then we have the launch escape system, that rather striking tower on top of the capsule. What was its purpose?
Safety. Purely for safety. Designed to safeguard the astronaut should a launch failure occur. A very real possibility with the rockets of that era. In an emergency, it would fire, pulling the capsule away from the malfunctioning rocket. Then deploy parachutes for a safe landing.
A crucial safety net, given the inherent risks.
Absolutely.
And it's here that little Joe, that rather endearingly named test rocket, comes into the picture.
Precisely. Little Joe played a key role in testing the launch escape system at various altitudes and speeds, ensuring it would function reliably if ever needed.
Thankfully, it was never required during a crewed flight. But even with all these safety precautions in place, those early missions must have been incredibly daunting for the astronauts. To be strapped into that tiny capsule, knowing all the things that could go wrong.
Oh, undoubtedly. These weren't pleasure cruises. They were pushing the boundaries of human endeavor. And those astronauts were fully aware of the dangers.
And yet, the sources reveal this incredible sense of dedication, a thirst for exploration that drove them on. They knew they were making history with every step they took.
A shared sense of purpose, don't you think? Not just among the astronauts, but everyone involved. Engineers, technicians, medical staff, all part of this collective effort, this determination to succeed.
That can-do attitude, it seems to be a hallmark of early American space exploration. But it wasn't just about national pride or one-upmanship with the Soviets. There was this genuine scientific curiosity, this desire to expand our understanding of the cosmos.
Project Mercury laid the groundwork for everything that followed, demonstrated that human spaceflight was possible, that we could not only survive, but function in the harsh environment of space. A giant leap forward, really, made possible by those courageous individuals in their, well, seemingly fragile capsules.
And those capsules serve as quite a stark reminder of how far we've come. Reading about the cramped interior of a Mercury spacecraft, it's hard to imagine spending any significant time in such confined quarters.
The astronaut had barely more room than in a small car, really. Strapped into this custom-molded seat, lying on his back, surrounded by instruments and controls. A testament to their resilience, wouldn't you say?
And they didn't even have a proper toilet in the early models.
No, they didn't. The need for, shall we say, bathroom breaks wasn't fully anticipated for those initial suborbital flights. Alan Shepard's rather predicament on the launch pad, a consequence of those launch delays, highlighted this oversight.
A slightly embarrassing situation, but one that spurred the development of a more practical solution.
Indeed. For the later, longer missions, they introduced a rudimentary urine collection system, though a far cry from the sophisticated waste management systems we have today.
One imagines it wasn't the most pleasant aspect of space travel, but then I suppose comfort comes second to making history. Now, before we delve into the later missions, I think it's worth mentioning the chimpanzee flights. Quite controversial even at the time.
The use of animals in spaceflight, it's always been a sensitive issue. But in the context of the time, it was deemed necessary to gather data before risking human lives. They needed to understand how living beings would react, the weightlessness, the G-forces, the radiation.
So Ham and Enos, the two chimpanzees who flew on Mercury missions, they were paving the way for the human astronauts.
In a sense, yes. Their flights provided invaluable data on the physiological effects of space travel. Ham's journey aboard Mercury Redstone 2, for instance, though not without its technical glitches, revealed the importance of a robust environmental control system.
His flight experienced an over-acceleration during launch, and a cabin pressure drop, if I'm not mistaken.
You're quite right. It speaks volumes about the resilience of these animals, that they could withstand such stresses. And then there was Enos, who flew aboard Mercury Atlas 5. The final test flight before John Glenn's orbital mission.
Enos's flight was designed to assess his ability to perform tasks, wasn't it? Responding to light signals.
Yes, his performance was closely monitored throughout the mission. Unfortunately, there was a malfunction. With the reward and punishment system during his task training, he received a number of unintended electric shocks.
Rather unfortunate incident. Thankfully, it didn't have any lasting consequences for Enos. These chimpanzee flights, despite the controversy, they played a significant role in paving the way for the first American orbital mission, John Glenn's historic flight aboard Friendship 7.
A pivotal moment, captured the world's attention, marked a turning point in the space race. But as we've seen, even Glenn's mission had its fair share of challenges.
The heat shield concern, the need for manual control, a reminder that spaceflight, even with meticulous planning and preparation, inherently risky. A real testament to the skill and the courage of those early astronauts and the ingenuity of the team supporting them. That they were able to overcome these obstacles. Shall we explore those later missions in more detail? We were just discussing the inherent risks and challenges of early spaceflight, but it wasn't all nail-biting tension and technical glitches, was it? The sources we've looked at suggest a certain spirit of adventure. Even, dare I say, a touch of humor amidst these pioneering missions.
Yes, quite. The early days of space exploration, well, they were marked by a remarkable degree of improvisation and a willingness to, let's say, bend the rules a bit. They were venturing into uncharted territory, after all. Both the engineers and the astronauts had to think on their feet, come up with ingenious solutions to some rather unique problems.
Take the astronaut training, for example. It wasn't just a matter of physical fitness and the right stuff.
Oh, not at all. The Mercury astronauts were subjected to a whole battery of grueling tests, centrifuges, altitude chambers, even underwater simulations. And to prepare for the sensory deprivation of space, they spent time in isolation tanks. Rather disconcerting, one imagines.
I can't imagine it would be a particularly enjoyable experience.
No. And yet, alongside this cutting-edge technology, they also employed some surprisingly low-tech training methods. I read about them using a playground roundabout, of all things.
A roundabout?
Yes, the human centrifuge, as it was affectionately known. They'd strap themselves into a chair mounted on a roundabout and have someone spin them around to simulate the G-forces experienced during launch and re-entry.
Remarkably resourceful. And what about simulating weightlessness?
One method involved flying parabolic trajectories in a large aircraft, creating brief periods of weightlessness. It's a technique still used today, often referred to as the vomit comet, for reasons which become apparent during the flight.
I can imagine. Space sickness was a significant issue on those early missions, wasn't it? How did they address that, aside from perhaps copious amounts of ginger ale?
Medication was developed to alleviate the symptoms, but it was also a process of adaptation, really. Learning to cope with the unfamiliar sensations of prolonged weightlessness. As they gained more experience, the severity tended to decrease.
Those early astronauts were real trailblazers, weren't they? Paving the way for all who followed. Speaking of which, we haven't mentioned Deke Slayton, the, shall we say, unlucky member of the Mercury 7.
Yes, a rather unfortunate turn of events for Slayton. Grounded due to an irregular heartbeat, just months before his scheduled flight. A bitter disappointment. But he went on to play a crucial role in the astronaut office, selecting and training future astronauts for the Gemini and Apollo programs. Became known as the chief astronaut, in fact.
And his story does have a happy ending. He finally got his chance to venture into space in 1975 as part of the Apollo-Soyuz test project.
A fitting culmination to a remarkable career.
It really is. What strikes me, looking back at Project Mercury, is that despite the setbacks, the technical challenges, the inherent risks, there was this pervasive sense of, well, fun, of adventure, a certain swagger that these pioneers exuded.
They were pushing the boundaries of human experience, and they did so with, well, a remarkable spirit of optimism, I'd say. And this sense of wonder wasn't confined to the astronauts and their support teams. The Mercury missions captured the world's imagination.
People were glued to their radios and their televisions, following every launch, every orbit, every splashdown. It was a time of great hope, wasn't it? This belief that anything was possible.
Project Mercury symbolized that hope, that ambition. It wasn't simply about reaching for the stars. It was about pushing the limits of human ingenuity, of technological innovation, the advancements that were sparked by Project Mercury. In fields like computing, communications, materials science, they had a profound impact, far beyond the realm of space exploration.
A catalyst for progress in so many ways, and that legacy continues to this day. Every rocket launch, every satellite image of our planet, it's a reminder of those early missions, those courageous individuals who dared to venture into the unknown.
Project Mercury is a testament, wouldn't you say, to the power of human endeavor. A demonstration that, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges, well, ingenuity, determination, and a bit of good humor can prevail. It's a story that continues to inspire, to explore, to discover, to reach for the stars.
A fitting sentiment to conclude our deep dive into Project Mercury. It's been a fascinating journey through a truly pivotal chapter in human history. As always, though, we like to leave you with a thought to ponder. Considering the limitations of the technology at the time, what aspect of Project Mercury do you find most impressive? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, keep exploring, keep discovering, and keep looking up at the stars.